to look at his calendar, look who we met with, look at his schedule, and start an investigative process just to make sure. But we have zero evidence of anything that's happened in PPSD in advance of the Warwick incident.
Thank you. Senator Dela Cruz, thank you for patience. Senator, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman DePalma. It's so hard to fathom what happened or didn't happen with Dr. Alege's hiring. And one thing that we absolutely must keep in mind is that he was hired under the state of Rhode Island's watch, because Providence, the failing schools in Providence, the school district is under state control right now and has been for some time. This school district, the Providence School District, has been in complete crisis mode for years, with buildings in extreme disrepair, chaotic classrooms, very little learning occurring at all, according to the Johns Hopkins reports. And many of us even brought tears to our eyes hearing the heart-wrenching report. And as a lawmaker, it affirmed for me how critical our public charter schools are, since we've just been talking about it, and Senator Bell brought it up, I will bring it up. I am at a complete loss as how we could even consider a moratorium on the expansion of existing schools, because these students have no other choice. It's either go to this failing school or another choice. This also reminds me of Dr. Stone at Zambarano Hospital and at the Cranston campus at Eleanor Slater Hospital, knowing full well that he was supposed to. Yes.
Senator, if I could, if we can just, we do have indicated about 22 to 24 folks. If we can, I know there's other issues to address.
I will wrap it up, Senator. I will wrap it up. So it reminds me of Dr. Stone knowing full well that he exposed himself to young boys at the YMCA locker room in Seekonk, yet he was still hired by the state to care for the state's most vulnerable patients. We have no idea what other allegations may surface around Dr. Alege after last week's arrest in Warwick for alleged assault on a child. Dr. Peters said that his trust has been betrayed. It almost sounds like he's excusing the failure to do a simple screening, or ignorance of what he already knew. Was this suddenly something discovered? It doesn't sound like it was, because of the testimony we just heard. Alege was accused of, I'll call it, fondling toes of at least 5 children in Florida, and we can only pray that he didn't assault more than 1 child in Rhode Island, even though 1 is 1 too many. And I remember a couple of years ago when an 11-year-old boy commented about attending class and smelling rats, and he was worried about his safety because of rats. Now he needs to be worried about being assaulted by an employee hired by the state that neglected the basic best practices of hiring. And it seems to me that it is the public's trust that was betrayed, plain and simple. So how do we earn that trust back? I don't think we can. And respectfully, through the chair, I would ask that Dr. Peters resign here and now.
Thank you, Senator. I have a follow-up question for both probably the superintendent more than the commissioner. So the superintendent, going back to the question regarding, I think, did you say that teachers and/or staff or parents had brought the situation to your attention after the individual was hired?
Could you be just a little more clear? I'm not quite following.
So, Superintendent, I'm trying to take notes as we go along as well. So since the individual was hired in May of 2020 until the incident manifested itself in May of 2021, I think it was May, maybe, I think it was April. I forgot what the date is, but within the year, did parents raise a concern to you, or teachers or paraprofessionals, without having to name all the groups, anybody within PPSD raised a concern of, we just hired the individual here, and the past is not a stellar, it's nowhere near, it's a very clouded and checkered past that the individual has. No one in PPSD, teachers, paraprofessionals, parents, whatever, brought that concern to you?
There were concerns. I read them on Twitter. There were
Did you bring those concerns?
Not quite following.
Okay. So the short answer is yes, they brought some concerns to you, even if it's one. Did you share those with the commissioner?
Yeah, so they didn't bring them to me. They were shared on Twitter and social media.
Okay, but you saw them, I guess, if they were on, I didn't see them because I'm not in PPSD, but you saw them on social media. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah.
Okay, because you said they're on social media, so you must have seen them there. Did you share that with the commissioner?
Yes.
Okay. Well, she just said it a little while ago. She didn't know about it.
Well, no, I think we got to be careful with the timing.
Well, so we only have.
Let me just clarify. That's when I became aware he was already hired.
Okay. But he was hired, but we didn't do anything once he was hired with that background, with that past. Here's the concern I think that's manifesting itself, Commissioner and Superintendent. As leaders of our educational establishment in the state of Rhode Island, obviously we wouldn't be here in this hearing if the state hadn't taken over Providence Public School System. The mayor hadn't said, please take this over, which he did. We are here, and it was made aware after he was hired, but so I guess the question becomes, so Commissioner, you were aware, Superintendent, you were definitely aware of his past. We did not inform teachers or others of something to be cognizant of or concerned about. Not that it's going to happen, but it happened within a year of being here. So I'm not going to look in the past of 9 years because that's in the past. But you're aware of what happened 10 or 11 years ago, and within 1 year of being here, almost the same thing occurs, and we didn't believe it's important to inform teachers or principals or whoever, nobody oversees him, I guess, because he reports to you. Is that how should we think about that? So Commissioner and Superintendent, you knew about it, but we didn't do anything with that information.
So when I became aware he was already hired, and unfortunately there's a due process for Dr. Alleghi. The rest of that, I think that the superintendent can answer.
But Commissioner, if I could, before we go to the superintendent, we, the state, are accountable and responsible. Most of me, we are accountable. When the state took over the Providence Public School System, we accepted accountability for the system. We delegate. There's accountability, there's delegation, and there's authority. When we, the state, took over the Providence Public School System, we, Rhode Island, basically through yourself, gave you accountability for the Providence Public School System. Through your accountability, you delegated the responsibility to the superintendent to ensure and carry out what the state is accountable for. Different than the city of Pawtucket, the town of Middletown, where you don't have accountability and responsibility for them. They are on their own. You have a role, but you're not accountable for what happens in Middletown or Pawtucket. But in the case of Providence, we, the state, through the mayor of Providence saying, it's yours, yes, take it over, he agreed to it, became accountable for education in Providence. So the commissioner is accountable, the superintendent's responsible, and has the authority to do what needs to happen. So in that structure, that hierarchy of, or network of accountability, responsibility, and authority, RIDE has accountability. You as the head of RIDE have that accountability. The superintendent has the responsibility, because you gave that to him, you delegated that to him, because you can't delegate accountability. It goes right back to the top. And ultimately, the authority he has as well. So I understand due process. I'm an engineer, I'm not a lawyer, but I understand due process. But the awareness that we, the state, had of the situation was not made known to teachers or staff or whomever. Is that true?
So what I can say is that I put my trust in the process that the district had. It is clear to me that that trust has been misguided, and that moving forward, I will be part of the process for higher level hires. That is clear. I apologize. I trusted that that process was being conducted. I thought that I had all the information at the time, and yes. So I take accountability for it. I own that, because you're right, I own accountability. And all I can do now is fix that, make sure that that never occurs again. And I trusted that the process was happening and occurring correctly.
Okay. Thank you. Superintendent, so let's talk about the responsibility that was delegated to you from the superintendent having, the commissioner or RIDE having accountability. You believed it was not appropriate to have principals or parents, principals or teachers, let's forget parents for a second, but principals or teachers made aware of what they should be on the lookout for. Not that it's going to occur, but it happened 11 years ago, and within 1 year, it happened again. That's the gamble that we took.
I want to make sure that I understand that there's an expectation that I should have alerted teachers and principals about Mr. Alege's incident in Tampa 11 years ago when he was hired in PPSD?
Yes.
That did not happen, and that's not a practice that we.
Okay.
I can share with you what we have put in place and what we will put in place, because I definitely hear the frustration, and I heard the commissioner loud and clear around why this will never happen again, and the safeguards that we have to put in place. We've added additional layers to make sure this never happens. But I did not send a message out organization-wide to teachers and principals about Dr. Alege's situation 12 years ago. I did not do that.
Okay. Senator, I have a follow-up after, but Senator Miller. I think it's Senator Miller. Yes, Senator Miller.
Yes, I have one quick question. I think a lot of my questions have already been asked and answered, but I have one quick question. There was a consultant involved in this hiring, and I'm just wondering the interaction and the history of when and why we hire a consultant when it's clear that both Providence School Department and Rhode Island Department of Education have human resource departments. So what triggers the hiring of a consultant, and historically, how does that work, and why in this case, and where does that cutoff occur on hiring a consultant to be involved in human resource issues?
Yes, sir. I want to try to separate this. The consultant wasn't hired to screen candidates' backgrounds. It wasn't hired to replace or take the role of HR at all. That wasn't why the consultant was hired. The consultant was hired to develop a performance, a leadership screening process to see if the candidates had the ability to support, supervise, develop principals. Could they actually do the job? Do you have the acumen, the experience to be able to go into a school, coach a principal, coach an assistant principal, help them look at their instructional priorities and move forward? That is very different. It's like a principal. The principal hires a teacher because they know what good teachers are, but HR does the screening. So basically, we hired an expert to come in on the leadership side of the house, not the screening. So the consultant wouldn't have anything to do at all with the background and that type of screening. There's two separate expectations. We left the background, the history search for the BCI that the state does, the FBI background check that we've done, that was done according with our HR department. That was not an expectation of neither RIDE nor PPSD. It was the consultant who did the leadership part.
Thank you. Senator Miller, was there a follow-up?
Oh, thank you very much.
Senator Mack.
Hi. I wanted to ask another question about the process of hiring. So it's become clear that after the hiring of Dr. Legge, several folks, including the commissioner and superintendent, were made aware of the incidents that happened a few years ago. Why was there no trigger at that point to hold an accountability process or to work on mediating the terms of his hiring or to work on a process? It became why was there nothing that triggered his removal?
Senator Mack, I think we lost your question. You're frozen. We'll come back to Senator Mack. I have one, I think, last question for Superintendent. Senator Mack, back to you. You're back.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead, Senator Mack. Senator Mack, you there? Okay. Let me go on.
Senator Palmer?
Yes,
okay,
sir.
My question was, it became clear after the hiring of Dr. Legge that folks... Can you hear me?
Yes, Senator Chacon, you'll be next.
Okay.
Go ahead, Senator Mack. Senator Mack? Okay, Senator Chacon, then we'll come back to Senator Mack.
Thank you. Dr. Peterson, I have a question, and I just received an email regarding the question I'm going to ask. Your earlier testimony is you notified no one on your committee prior to the hiring of Dr. Agali. Is that correct?
Correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. Was there another incident in 2017 that you failed to notify parents of an alleged sexual attack in the school district that you were in?
No, sir. That was incorrect.
No?
I can walk you through that process if you're interested in me sharing what happened. But that's abjectly false.
Okay. So hold on 1 minute.
Superintendent, I believe Senator Chacon is
Yep. No.
Go ahead.
Hold on, I'm back. Where was it? I just had it. Give me 1 second and I'll bring it up.
Senator Chacon, I think it would be Shields Middle School?
Okay.
Is it Shields Middle School?
Yes, it was. That's correct. And the reporter asked you questions. And one of the questions was, there was a possible sex offense investigating going on. You removed the substitute and parents weren't notified. How is that possible? Peters. So yeah, we didn't look at it that way. We looked at it, there was an accusation of an adult. Reporter. A possible sex offense. Peters. That's the label that you are attaching. Reporter. That's what it says in the police report. Possible sex offense. Peters. And that's fair, as well as what we done is made sure that we followed all our safety protocols. We removed the adult immediately and launched an investigation through the police department. Peters. They said immediate notified the sheriff's department based at the school, the SRO. But according to the sheriff's report, it was the parent who notified him. And that was days after the school said they were first. No, that's not me. That's you talking to the reporter.
Yes, sir. So there's a difference between notifying the sheriff and the SRO that's actually on campus. So in Florida, at least in Hillsborough County, all secondary schools have SROs. So the principal notified the SRO when the complaint came. There's a very clear process, just sort of like we have here in Providence. What happens when there's an alleged abuse case? At the time, I am the deputy superintendent. So there are 3 levels between me and the principal. When the principal heard the accusation from the student, removed the teacher or the substitute, blocked the teacher from coming, ever subbing in the district again, called Children and Family Services, called the deputy, did everything that the principal was supposed to do. There's no evidence that the principal did not follow process. So we didn't break down in any policy or any process. What we counseled the principal to do is how do we improve communication? Because the principal did reach out to families. It just wasn't every kid in the classroom. So we went back and we made sure that she contacted every parent in the classroom.
And was the teacher in question the same teacher that or the doctor we're talking about now?
No, sir. This was a substitute teacher.
Okay.
This was a substitute teacher. Yes, sir.
All right. Thank you for your answer.
Thank you. I think we're going to, I'd like to have, there are going to be 2 more quick questions, and I promise, and then we're going to go to Board President Nick Heemans. First, we're going to go to back to Senator Mack, and then Senator Oyer, if you can please keep the question minimal on the topic, and then we're going to go to Nick Heemans. Thank you. Senator Mack.
Yeah. My question is, after it was made clear to all folks who were involved in the hiring decision, including yourself, Commissioner, why was there no trigger to have an accountability process or to work on offboarding Dr. Alege after these allegations were made clear after his hiring?
So I brought the superintendent in, and I stepped down the superintendent and asked him what happened here. And he walked me through everything he did. He called the superintendent in Hillsborough. He talked to everybody there. This is a certified person who got several promotions, who went on. And then years later, Harrison went to work with him 4 years. They worked together. And there were never any allegations. There was never anything that he saw personally that he really could say that was a problem. So after that happened, we went through the whole process again and asked those questions. And the superintendent turned back around and made sure that he closed the loop with Florida. That is what has happened. That's what happened during the process, after the process. Mr. Alege already was working in the district. So I think that for us legally, we looked at what that would look like. It would look like a very different process. But at the time, those were the steps that were taken.
I find it very troubling that someone who has navigated spaces with young people and has proven to be a predator, and has also led to some grooming practices with our young people, was not raised as a red flag, both in Florida and in Rhode Island. And that raises some serious causes of concern for me for the judgment of not only the hiring practices, but also the judgment of folks who are involved in really vetting people who are working with our young people. And the fact that there was no larger recourse after this was discovered by folks in such high positions of power, I think speaks to the level of concern that many folks have had over this takeover. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Senator Mack. Excuse me, Thank you, Senator Mack. Over to Senator Oyer, and then over to Board Chair Nick Hemond. Senator Oyer.
I completely agree with what Senator Mack was saying about the level of concern that I have. And so this, Commissioner, this question is for you, I think. I'm curious, there's been a lot in the news over the decades where we have learned about how child abuse manifests itself and how those types of behaviors manifest. Is there, and you don't have to go into great detail on this question, but does RIDE have, training programs, guidance that is shared with the districts and that is utilized through the work that RIDE does in oversight of our schools that takes into consideration all that we have learned from the different sex abuse scandals, childhood sex abuse scandals? I would just like to know that RIDE is looking at this, that there's an awareness of this field, and that RIDE incorporates this into its practices and policies.
So we have mandated reporting, and we also have when there are cases, and we also work with DCYF. And what I will do is get back to you with all the steps that happen and how what guidance we give to the districts. I will make sure that I get you that information.
Thank you. I appreciate that. I look forward to the follow-up, and I'm sure that I am speaking for many of the members on the committee who would also like to see that follow-up, because I have to say, after almost, we're on like going on to the third hour of hearing, I've heard dismissiveness of grooming behavior. I've heard, the two people who are entrusted with the safety of our school district who are upset that their trust was betrayed, when I'm more concerned about the trust that our children have, that our parents have, that our teachers have, that our community has, when they are sending our kids to school every day. We have learned a lot in this area, and to be sitting through a meeting where it seems that we're going to just obfuscate timelines and point fingers as to whose responsibility it is, disheartening, doesn't do it. This has been an incredibly frustrating experience so far.
Thank you, Senator.
So can I just respond to that? I have to say that if we're coming off dismissive, that is not the intent. I am very heartbroken about this. This is not something that I sit here and justify. I'm really pained by this. So if it's coming off that way, I truly apologize, because that is not what's happening here.
Thank you, Commissioner. Board President Hemond, I see you're with us. Thank you for being with us. If I can please ask, and I appreciate you've been with us as long as you have, Commissioner and Superintendent tonight, if you can please hang on while we have the folks come on who will provide a verbal comment. You can at least hear. We're not going to ask questions. We'll be hearing their testimony and moving from there. But I do want to turn it over to Board President Nick Hemond. And I wasn't sure if you had any opening comments, Nick, or if we want to go into some questions.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for having us here today, and thank you for providing an oversight hearing. I think it's important that we have accountability during a state takeover. And I think what this whole situation has highlighted is, this is a very serious lapse in judgment that has taken place. And it's one that highlights the need to replace certain elements of what the school board would do that had been peeled away as we've done a takeover. In years past, and I want the committee to have this just so you have context of the situation, prior to the turnaround being initiated, any hire over, I want to say the rank of from assistant principal on up, was subject to being presented at a school board meeting and had to be voted on by the school board prior to being hired. In doing that, it was sort of that one last layer of protection to make sure that we were getting people that were worthy of being in classrooms and school buildings with our students. So in doing that, you would get a Google search before a school board meeting that would raise questions. When the turnaround occurred, that role was peeled back, and I don't disagree that as part of that process that shouldn't have happened, but it wasn't replaced. And I think what the commissioner has said tonight is that that role needed to be replaced because perhaps one more net of protection would have caught something like this. So I think that's important, and I think as we go through however much longer this lasts, I presume it's going to be at least 2 to 3 more years potentially. As we go through that, we need to continue to learn about the process so that when we're changing things, we can replace them with structures that provide the same level of oversight and protection. And I think the House and the Senate and these committees can do that. So I think that's important to point out. I also would suggest to this committee that you don't need a blue ribbon panel to tell you how to prevent something like this from happening. The concerning thing here is that nobody knew about it until people started calling it out in the media in June of 2020. And to me, that's a very serious breach of trust. It's a very serious lapse in judgment. And it's not for the school board to do, but there has to be some accountability to that. It can't just be a hearing that leads to nothing. And I know that is not the reputation of this committee or this chairman, and I hope that there will be something that comes out of this. But only one person prior to hiring had this information. Had it been shared with the commissioner, had it been shared with anybody else involved in the process, perhaps the person wouldn't have been hired at all. I could tell you that I told the superintendent when I first learned about this in June of 2020 through social media and Facebook and Twitter messages that in the old days, I wouldn't have voted to confirm them. And if I found out that this had been, we had hired somebody without full knowledge of relevant and critical facts, that the result would not have been something that any of us would have looked forward to, but there definitely would have been accountability. So I think we have to learn from this process. I think we have to make sure that, you know, the idea, we peeled back some of the elements of city governance that was obstructing progress in the district, quickly being able to hire and make personnel decisions, and we didn't replace that with anything that provided some sort of check and accountability. And I think the number one thing I take away from this is we have to find that, and we have to find it quickly. And I'm happy to answer any questions that you have or any members of this committee might have of me, to the extent that I can help you, you know, provide that guidance going forward.
Board President, thank you very much. Just to reaffirm, I think you said the board was not involved at all in this process of hiring the individual, correct?
No.
Okay.
No. Quite honestly, I don't think I even knew he had been hired before the issues came up in June of 2020.
Okay. Thank you. With regards to the, and this will be something we'll wrap up with later, as president of the board, obviously you're keenly aware of and keen insight with regards to where the Providence School Department needs to go as part of this, where it was, the takeover, et cetera. What kind of thoughts might you share as it relates to the takeover and the turnaround that needs to occur going forward from here? based on the incident?
Well, in this incident, I think that there has to be approval akin to what the school board used to do, not from the school board. I don't think clearly that's appropriate given the orders that are in place, but whether it's the Board of Education, whether it's the Commissioner's Office, there has to be a final line of defense to make sure that we get these things right. There is no point to a hiring committee if the hiring committee doesn't have all the information. So I think in terms of hiring, it's not rocket science. It's not something we need consultants to tell us. It's that we have to make sure the right questions get asked, and not everything you need to know about a person shows up in an FBI background investigation. And you can't just rely on that. And sometimes we've had these issues occur where, you know, we didn't know, and there was no way to know until someone came forward later on with an allegation. That wasn't the case here. What we can take away from the takeover is a question that, you know, we could sit here 3 or 4 more hours and go through. I think the fundamental thing that I personally have learned in the last 2 years is the end result cannot simply be, you know, in 2 years the takeover is over and we just turn it all back over to the same institutions that were running the school districts before. The structure and interplay between the school board, between the mayor's office, between the city council, all needs to change, because if you send it back to the city, it will just be the same problems. In my personal opinion, the most productive time I've spent on this board was in the early days of the takeover, working closely with the commissioner prior to having a superintendent, and preparing the transition that we had to go through. And we were able to do things efficiently and effectively. And it was because we didn't have the same old city political structure that we had to work through. And as you all, many of you know me from the State House, I know how to work through a political structure. But what became evident was having a board in place that was simply advising the educators involved was a really much more efficient process. And so I think as the state leaders are examining what's happening here, and I know there are calls to end the takeover, and I know there's legislation that people have talked about introducing. I just think before we start trying to end it, we have to figure out what we're going to go back to. What is the governance structure going to look like? And it cannot be the governance structure that existed, you know, at least since the original passage of the city charter, which put that structure in place.
Nick, thank you very much. Questions for the board president, Nick Hemond.
Mr. Chairman, I just have one. So,
Senator Sebeny.
Thanks. So, I guess from what I'm hearing, so the Providence School Board knew all about this a year ago too. But from there, nothing until last week. So I don't know where to turn with this. You know, it seems to me that this circumstance is has a high potential for reoccurring in the future. So anyway, that's just an observation. I'm done.
Thank you, Senator. I think we're now going to move over to the public testimony. We have, like I indicated, about 22 folks. I'm going to ask folks, if you're standing by as we call you, when you do come on to testify, if you're listening, I'm going to ask you to keep your comments as close to 3 to 5 minutes as possible. More on the lower side than the upper side. So the goal would be to keep your comments to 3 minutes. We appreciate you being with us. At 22 minutes, at 22 people, 3 minutes each, it's at least another hour. It's an important topic. It needs to be addressed, but we ask to try and be as succinct as you can. Our first person
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, sir.
I apologize for interrupting. I just wanted to take about 30 seconds to a minute just before we the comment, just to reinforce our deepest and serious apology. We got this one wrong, and we acknowledge that, and we know that there is significant trust building that has to occur. And I apologize for us having to spend the time tonight addressing the situation. What I want you to have confidence in is that we do have a path forward. President Hemond talked a little bit about a blue ribbon panel, and that's part of it. But the blue ribbon panel is really just to analyze our structures and our processes to make them better. There are some very specific things that we're going to do immediately moving forward. We're going to make sure that we contract with an executive vetting company for all top-level administrators, beginning with the background check, police records, social media, internet search, all of those things that we've talked about. The commissioner's been pretty open about her expectations and RIDE's involvement in this process. After the superintendent selects a candidate, I want to make sure that the committee and the commissioner conduct a full review. So I just wanted to step in and say that we've already made significant amendments to how we're going to move forward, and I do not anticipate this ever happening again. I just want to appreciate the time, and again, we apologize, we own it, and we're going to make things right.
Thank you, Superintendent, much appreciated. Our first person to testify is Enrique Sanchez. Or Enrique Sanchez, I may have gotten that wrong, I apologize. Is this Enrique or Enrique?
Enrique, Senator Palmer, how you doing?
Good. Enrique, over to you. I ask you to try and keep your testimony to as close to 3 to 5 minutes as possible, erring on the 3-minute side, please. Thank you.
Great. I will try my best. Yep. All right. How's everyone doing? My name is Enrique Sanchez. I am a political director of the BLM PAC, and I am also quite involved with some of the progressive leftist organizations in the region. I am here. I am also a substitute teacher here at the Providence Public School System. I have had the pleasure to work with and the honor to work with a lot of youth in the district. I've been at 3 different schools thus far as a substitute teacher. I think destiny has brought me to this position to be there for our most marginalized and most impoverished, marginalized students in the community. Folks, I am very upset. Oh, before anything, I would like to thank the Senate committee here for having us here for testimony. This is very important that we call this out, call out the behavior of the superintendent who was caught in this act of inappropriatism, and we are here calling out, the superintendent and commissioners both complicity in the situation. Folks, we are at a crossroads in education here in Rhode Island, especially in Providence. We do not have time for these games. We do not have time for these acts of misappropriate, actions committed by adults. Our students do not have time for this. Our students do not have time for this BS, excuse my language. Families do not have time in Providence. We have to lead by example. We have to lead by example, and what this means is hiring and retaining educators at all levels, not just teachers. This is superintendents, commissioners who are going to be dedicated to our students from the very get-go, okay? We don't have time for wasted time. That's the word. We don't have time for wasted time on behalf of our network. They haven't been there for our students. We've been going to school all year round since the pandemic hits. We've been in school learning while, Black and brown students have been getting sick. Black and brown parents of our students have been getting murdered, killed during COVID. And these folks here are coming at us with, these acts of inappropriate actions. We have to lead by example. We have to hire good administrators, good people who are going to lead this in the right direction. Superintendent Peters, Commissioner Infante Green, calling on y'all, please resign for the sake of our students, our parents, community leaders. Please resign because you are hurting a lot of people in the district, a lot of people, families, individuals in the city and the state. As a person who has been there on the front lines from September to this very day, I have seen the damage that our students have been imposed on, our teachers have been imposed on, and we have to please take into consideration the future of the education of our students, and these acts and these inappropriate actions committed by people who run our district are unexcusable. Unexcusable, and we have to move forward, but with consensus, dialogue, transparency at all fronts, not just from one front, but at all fronts. That's it for now. Thank you so much.
Enrique, thank you very much. Next up is Alexander Lucchini.
Good evening.
Good
Thank
evening,
you very much, Mr.
Good evening, Alexander. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. If you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, it'd be appreciated.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I want to thank the committee for putting together this Oversight Committee hearing so that it can be put on the public's ability to have an understanding about what occurred with this hiring and just as important, what's been going on during the state takeover. I'm a very outspoken advocate for Providence students, and I have been for my 13 years as a Providence teacher, and I have not been for the past year out of fear and intimidation of the state takeover. When Superintendent Peters was first hired and came into the district, he made a comment, I believe, to the Boston Globe where he said, going above and beyond is the new normal in Providence schools. And without ever meeting me, I can tell you as well as other members of the committee that I've gone above and beyond for 13 years now. Then in September, when the rollout of the Virtual Learning Academy was a complete disaster and a mess for both parents and students, as well as the teachers that were doing their absolute best to provide educational services to those students, the superintendent said, I understand, but I don't sympathize. And he came before the committee tonight. He's asking everybody for apologies, and he's asking for us to be comfortable with him being imperfectly perfect, perfectly imperfect. And I'm sorry, that self-help mantra should not come on the backs of Providence students and the Providence community. We've heard tonight about the complete lack of transparency around the hiring process. I think the school board president Heeman did a fantastic job of talking about that additional layer, that final check that could have been done that maybe would have stopped this. One would like to hope that the first 6 levels, which seems to be a pretty convoluted process that many of us were not aware of till tonight, existed. But going forward, this is much more about just the actions of the superintendent, a year ago in the employment of 10 months. I think everybody's looking at to what's going to be happening moving forward. And I think what we need to do is this committee has the ability to continue this process of questioning and getting an understanding. So far tonight, all I heard was we're not going to do this again, and we heard that the commissioner is going to undertake this high-level hiring. And my question coming forward, and I hope that the committee also questions in the future, is at what point does the commissioner have more responsibilities than can be handled? The commissioner is not only the commissioner for every public school student K through 12 in Rhode Island, but is also overseeing this. In her testimony, the commissioner said that we need the day-to-day operations of the district are on Superintendent Peters, and now it seems like she's willing to kind of curtail some of those responsibilities and put them on herself. Is that the best use of our resources? Is that the best use of the position of superintendent of Providence Schools? To essentially have an important aspect of the position be taken away. I feel differently. I feel that that's not
Alexander, if you can please
to handle that.
Alexander,
I also feel that
Alexander, if you can please wrap it up, it'd be appreciated.
Certainly, thank you so much. I think that what we need to do is we need to have more conversations about transparency in the state takeover, the role that both the superintendent and the commission play in this, and how this entire process seems to be convoluted and up to the decision and discretion of 2 individuals and is not including the public and the community and the parents and the students at all. Thank you so much for allowing public testimony and a wonderful handle of the testimony and conversation tonight. I appreciate it.
Alexander, thank you and have a good evening.
Next
we have up Laura Lee Brady. Stand by. Good evening, Laura Lee.
Hello.
Oh, welcome to the committee. If you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, it'd be appreciated.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you.
My name is Laura Lee Brady. I am a Providence Public School teacher, and I want to thank the Senate Oversight Committee for holding the superintendent and the commissioner accountable tonight. First and foremost, I want to acknowledge the harm done to the victim and praise the courage this young person had to come forward. We cannot lose sight of the fact that real harm was done to a young person due to the superintendent and commissioner's poor judgment and nepotism. As a teacher, I have had students confide in me that they are survivors of abuse and share their everyday struggle to navigate that trauma. Our students trust us to protect them. It is offensive to hear the commissioner tell WPRI, "Here we are. Could we have made a better choice? Probably," and deny knowing about the past allegations. Undermining our students' sense of security and trust in the adults that are supposed to care for them is not a hindsight of 2020 situation. Giving someone a second chance does not mean putting a known abuser in a position of authority over a vulnerable population. My first interaction with Harrison Peters was in August when I reached out to him to raise concerns about the poor ventilation, complete lack of stable pods, and social distancing in our reopening plan. Peter's response was to completely dismiss me and imply that I simply didn't want to be with my students. When I raised the issue to the commissioner, she apologized on his behalf and offered this excuse. He has a lot going on. He's getting a lot of emails. I share this to illustrate that there is a pattern at play here. Again and again, our turnaround leaders have put our students' health and safety at risk and make excuses to protect each other at the expense of the community they serve. I urge the Senate to continue to hold the commissioner ultimately accountable for her hiring practices. She hired Harrison Peters knowing that he had covered up a substitute who masturbated in front of his middle school students. There is another hire, Brett Dickens, who no one has mentioned tonight, but who has a similar checkered past covering up abuse. This cannot stand. Our students deserve better. Our students deserve turnaround leaders that actually care about them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laura Lee. Next, we'll be hearing from Elizabeth Finneran.
Hello?
Good evening, Elizabeth. Welcome to the committee. I'd ask if you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. It would be appreciated. Thank you, Elizabeth.
3 minutes or less. Okay. Thank you so much. My name is Liz Finneran. I've been teaching in Providence for 15 years, and I thank you for allowing this public comment. I'm actually grateful to Mr. Peters because he has shown the world how easy it is for pedophiles to infiltrate the places where children are supposed to be safe, and how much denial he and his boss have about child molestation. Peters has stated explicitly that because Alege was not arrested in Florida, that standard of care is good enough for the children of Providence. I'm going to restate that. Because Alege was not arrested in Florida, Peters decided that Providence children did not deserve better. Peters has shown us that he does not know how to keep children safe. Rule number 1, do not bring in a known pedophile to a school district and then turn around when he reoffends and say that the district has to look more closely at its hiring practices. That means that the finger is pointing directly at you, Mr. Peters, because you are the one who has the power? If you don't, then please explain how you are not responsible. Peters has also shown us that he does not know that all teachers are mandated reporters of child abuse. The reason why reports to DCYF are so much lower since March of 2020 is because the first people who see these signs are teachers. Because that interaction has been reduced, reports are lower. Teachers are trained to see and follow up on obvious and subtle signs of abuse. Teachers know more than Mr. Peters because we know that a report of multiple boys being fondled in private behind closed doors is more than a red flag. Peters thought it was okay to bring this predator into Rhode Island because Alege wasn't arrested, and now he wants to look at Alege's date book? Tell that to the young man in Warwick, face to face, I dare you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Liz. Appreciate it. Next, we have up Lisa Nibbles. Good evening, Lisa. Welcome to Senate Committee. I can ask if you please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, it would be appreciated.
Okay.
Thank you, Lisa.
Should I start now?
Yes, go ahead. Yes, thank you.
Okay. My name is Lisa Niebels. I'm from Providence, Rhode Island, and I just want to say that I'm very upset with Harrison Peters, who recommended this toe-popping superintendent, and Angelica Green should also be replaced. I have no confidence in their leadership at this point. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lisa, for testifying tonight. Okay. Committee, stand by. We're trying to reach the next person. Stephanie Muse? We're working down the list. We're trying to reach the next person to testify. Seems as though some folks aren't home or not answering. Stand by. Jordana. Good evening, Jordana. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. I'd ask you to try and please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less. Over to you, Jordana.
All right, thank you so much. I'm a teacher in the state-run city of Central Falls. In 2010, I was fired along with all of my high school colleagues because students were not achieving. Essentially, we were fired because we weren't doing our jobs. No one cared about the lack of funding and resources and large class sizes. Those were excuses, and the blame was placed solely on teachers, and for that we were fired. This is no different. The commissioner did not do her job, and the superintendent did not do his job. We must hold them both accountable for their negligence.
Ask yourself this: would this have happened, or would this have been allowed to happen in a suburban district? Thank you.
Thank you, Jordana, for testifying tonight. It's much appreciated.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Jeremy? Jeremy Sensor, welcome to the committee.
Yes, sir.
Senate Oversight Committee. I'd ask you to please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less. Over to you, Jeremy.
All right, I'm going to roll back my comments. I think we've heard a lot tonight. Thank you, Chairman DePalma, as well as the Senate, for providing this important oversight for the failed state takeover of Providence schools. And I'd like to definitely remember why we're here in the first place, and that's because a child here in Rhode Island was abused, and it was avoidable. The situation with Dr. Alege should not require much discussion at all. The facts are clear. The commissioner empowered the superintendent to create a network of well-connected individuals to implement a system of loyalty and following orders being the main criteria. Student safety was absolutely ignored. It should be noted that the commissioner publicly insulted the Rhode Island way, yet her hand-picked superintendent showed us that the network way is much worse. The network way brought us a person with a known pattern of abuse. This person harmed at least one child that we know. We learned tonight that the main reason was that he hadn't been caught for about 11 years. The superintendent vouched for Dr. Alege, even though the information about inappropriate behavior was readily available. Perhaps this committee will uncover the type of vetting that missed a simple Google search, although now we know that it was a consultant's fault. The 6 steps should have included a 7th, that 7th being a Google search. Those of us outside the network did not miss the information. We called out the abuse, and we questioned how this type of candidate was considered world-class talent. The superintendent and commissioner had access to the exact same information, and they allowed him to continue anyway. This put our children at risk, and this alone is enough of a reason for removal of the superintendent and commissioner. Well, this hiring decision shows enough lack of professional judgment and disregard for student safety to warrant a change in leadership. This committee, I'm sure, will uncover other questionable staffing decisions. Another high-level network hire, Brett Dickens, failed to protect a 14-year-old student in Stoughton who was sexually assaulted by Dickens' nephew. This information was also available through news reporting. We are 2 years removed from the Johns Hopkins report that led to the state takeover of PPSD. I was a member of that review team. As teachers, we embraced this as a chance to finally fix a broken system. If we don't change course immediately, we're going to waste this once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. We should be getting to the real work, not attempting to build trust or assigning a blue ribbon task force after the superintendent and commissioner knowingly put students in harm's way. The lack of concern for student safety requires that we immediately remove the leadership, and that includes at the state level. These problematic hiring decisions are well above and beyond the mismanagement well documented when teachers overwhelmingly voted no confidence in the commissioner and superintendent. I'm thankful that the Rhode Island Senate has begun this process of providing oversight and accountability that has been missing from the takeover. To the Rhode Island community, putting students first is not part of a public relations campaign. It's where our focus needs to be in order to create the schools that our families deserve. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much for your testimony tonight. Much appreciated. Next up, we'll have Arav Sundarish. Good evening, Arav. Welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. I'd ask you to please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less. Thank you, Arav.
All right. Thank you so much. Good evening, everyone. My name is Arav Sundaresh. Thank you to the committee for holding this session and for welcoming public comment tonight. This is tough. I'm a Providence resident. I'm a Providence teacher, and I care about these schools deeply. The issues I want to raise upset me. The concerns around administrative hiring practices came up publicly last week, as we've been talking about tonight, and trust really has been a key idea that people have brought up. Even the discussions around the situation itself tonight deteriorate trust. It's alarming that the Education Commissioner reported she didn't know about this individual's prior behaviors in Florida earlier than this week, but then tonight she said she did find out about it after he was hired. That doesn't feel like accountability. We've heard from news outlets about the administrator's history of toe popping in Hillsborough County in August 2020. The story was posted heavily on social media. And then in that same article, as someone else brought up, were concerns about another newly hired Providence District Administrator. And as well, like we brought up concerns around the superintendent's parent communications, minimizing a teacher's sex offense in a classroom. I wonder if RIDE has investigated these trust-breaking issues in the hiring processes. How can the commissioner and superintendent build trust when these concerns are overlooked and dismissed? So I really believe oversight needs to extend not only here, but with funding and major partnerships. For example, we need facts as to how much federal funding has been allocated to the new teacher project for the PPSC leadership cohort. This is an organization like Teach for America that creates fast pathways for teacher and administrator certification. When we use federal funds to partner with TNCP, who ultimately benefits? Is it the students or the executives at TNCP? I wonder how we as taxpayers can trust this when poor judgment has been exhibited in what we've been discussing tonight. Similarly, strong district ties to Chiefs for Change bring up other questions of trust. Both superintendent and the commissioner have strong ties there, and some of Governor McKee's biggest donors are affiliated with this organization who push privatization and works against public schools. The cards seem stacked toward making the state takeover about charter takeover, and I am worried because the other night at the House Committee for Finance and Subcommittee on Education, the commissioner made clear that individual charter boards oversee finances and budgets, and there's no oversight from elected officials, but taxpayer money is there. So again, how can we trust as taxpayers this situation when poor judgment has been exhibited in what we're discussing tonight? I really hope that moving forward, that we can prioritize collaboration, that we can make sure all stakeholders are at the decision-making table rather than just held in just a few powerful individuals. And I want to be clear that those representatives can't be handpicked. Growing investment empowerment requires activating engagement from more people affected by these appointments to honor all voices. Thank you again for holding this session and to develop oversight and accountability. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much for your testimony tonight. Much appreciated. We'll now be moving over to Juan Martinez. Good evening, Juan. How are you tonight?
Good, good.
Juan, if you can please, welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. If you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, it would be greatly appreciated.
Absolutely. Okay, so my name is Juan. I'm calling to support Superintendent Peters. I don't think now is the time to reconsider yet another change in Providence, as under his leadership, students of color in our community are finally seeing some progress that it obviously needs. I would also like to point out that testifying today felt very swept under the rug, and I know that a lot of the parents like myself would have called to support the superintendent in his role. I feel that having Superintendent Peters step down from his role is not only racist, but unjust, and I'd like to express my deep support for him on behalf of my children and my community. Thank you.
Thank you, Juan, for testifying tonight. Is appreciated. We're working to try to reach the next person. Stand by. Stand by, committee. Next to testify will be Natalie Arboleda. Good evening, Natalie. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. I'd ask you if you can please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less. It would be greatly appreciated. Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you so much. I just wanted to express my sincerest support for our Superintendent Harrison Peters. He has built an incredible amount of trust for our children in Providence, and it would be an injustice to thousands of kids if he lost this position of leadership. Since his arrival, we finally have progress in Providence, and things are finally improving for families and kids of color like mine. If he's fired or forced to step down, not only are we teaching our children that people of color are discriminated against in inexplicable ways, but that it's okay for previous white leaders to commit serious crimes and get away with them. I say this to bring up the point of the gym teacher, James Duffy, who was molesting underage children in the Providence district for four years ago, under the watch of the school board, principal, and superintendent, all led by white people. These horrendous actions were never seen as a reason to fire the white superintendent, Chris Mayer. Our students are safer today under Superintendent Peters than they have ever been, and this should not be taken lightly. This is no excuse as to why James Duffy, the white gym teacher, who molested multiple girls, did not elicit a hearing and calls for school board members or the superintendent to be removed. Keeping Superintendent Peters is the most important step we can take to continue a better path for our kids, and it is crucial that we keep people of color in leadership roles who understand our students, our communities, and our future. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you very much, Natalie. Are you still there, Natalie? Okay. I would like those for reviewing to know that this is a fact-finding committee, fact-finding hearing tonight. As I indicated earlier, it's about facts, it's about data, it's about the situation in front of us, it's about getting to understanding and appreciating what has transpired. In no way, shape, or form should anyone be construed to think this is anything other than that. Thank you. Senator Dela Cruz. Sorry, I just saw your hand up.
That's okay. Thank you, Chairman DePalma. You know, racism is a serious accusation and should be obviously dealt with because there's no place for it in society whatsoever. But I'd like to point out that the letter that was penned to this committee was done so by Black and Latino members in addition to white members. So to throw that term around really diminishes how severe that charge is, and it's disappointing to hear people call in and just flippantly use that term. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you, Senator. Next, we have Jamie Maya Chavez Aiken. I think if I did that correctly. Good evening, Maya.
This is Maya.
Maya, thank you for joining the Committee on Oversight tonight. I'd ask you to please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. My name is Maya Chavez. I am a civics teacher at Dr. George Alvarez High School in Providence Public Schools. I also want to note that I am also a teacher of color. I want to thank the Providence delegation and the Senate Oversight Committee and everyone who came here to demand accountability for their attention to this important matter. The Superintendent Peters put our community at risk when he hired Yinka Alege as Network Superintendent of Secondary Schools. Alege had a well-documented history of inappropriately touching children's feet in his private office. This behavior was well-documented in publications easily found through a basic Google search. The Sun Sentinel, for example, reported on Alege's behavior on July 24, 2009. The story was also covered by the Tampa Tribune. After Alege was hired in Providence, Linda Borg at the Providence Journal wrote about Alege's disturbing history in an article published June 5, 2020. When people raised concerns about Alege's history, the district dismissed our concerns. District spokesperson Laura Hart said in the Providence Journal on June 5, 2020, Alege was a young educator when he did this and wouldn't think of doing anything like that now. I'd also like to note that that same article states Alege will be hired, suggesting that at the time this was published, his hiring had not yet been completed. When Alege was arrested on April 20th of this year, Superintendent Peters responded by placing Alege on paid leave. Peters only asked for Alege's resignation after the April 20th assault became public knowledge. Alege's hiring was an egregious and unacceptable choice on the part of Superintendent Peters. Superintendent Peters should be immediately removed from his position. I would also suggest that RIDE suspend Peters' emergency certification. But the problems go far beyond Dr. Alege. The actions we heard about this evening are part of an ongoing and egregious pattern of practices. Brett Dickens currently earns a six-figure salary at PCTA and Providence Public Schools. At her previous job in Stoughton, she was sued for failing to stop harassment of a student after a male student, who was Brett's nephew, quote, I'm quoting the Boston Globe here, distributed nude photos of her to classmates. This individual continues to be employed in our district. Peters himself should never have been hired. In April 2017, the West Tampa Bay ABC Action News reported that Peters had failed to notify parents after a sex offense took place in the district where Peters was chief of schools. We heard Senator Chacon describe that incident earlier, but I would encourage you to check ABC 10 Action News April 2017 for the details of Superintendent Peters' cover-up of a sexual incident involving children. Now, the hiring of Yinka Alege, Harrison Peters, and Brett Dickens are part of a broader systemic problem. School leaders fail to keep our community safe, and in my own experience, the district failed to keep me safe. I was assaulted by a Providence public school teacher. He was charged with second-degree sexual assault. And before he was charged, I got a 3-year protective order against him in district court. The teacher who assaulted me worked at my school, and even after I got the protective order, Providence Public Schools refused to ensure that he would not be in the school building where I work. I was expected to come to work in a building with somebody who had been charged with second-degree sexual assault of me. I missed work and had to use sick days because the district refused to assure me that the teacher who assaulted me wouldn't be allowed to keep working in the same school building as I was. I was told they had to protect his privacy. When I met with the representatives from HR, I was told the teacher in question was great with the students. In fact, the only person who took action was Commissioner Infante Green, who intervened immediately when I sent a letter to her explaining the situation. My first day back at work, Providence Public Schools HR scheduled 9 interviews with my colleagues regarding events involving myself and the person who assaulted me. They had weeks to investigate and waited to my first day back so that the school was abuzz with news and discussion of the sexual assaults that I had been the victim of. What's happening in our schools, it's not just about Alege or Peters or Brett Dickens. It's about institutional betrayal. Institutional betrayal, according to the American Psychological Association, is when trusted and powerful institutions such as schools, churches, the military, and government act in ways that visit harm on those dependent on them for safety and well-being. Students and teachers are by definition dependent upon schools for safety and our well-being. Institutional betrayal occurs when an institution causes harm to an individual who trusts or depends upon that student. Institutional betrayal may remain unchecked when performance is valued over or divorced from well-being of members, as it sounds was the case involving Peters and Alege and perhaps Dickens. We also, when institutional betrayal occurs, it often coincides with attempts to silence dissent, which we saw happen in our district. Negative repercussions for reporting abuse can have a direct silencing effect, e.g. victims withdraw complaints, but also feed back into the institutional culture to discourage future reports. So not only did Peters' decision to hire Alege lead to a situation in which Alege made students unsafe, it contributed to a broader toxic, unsafe situation in which we tolerate individuals who leave children unsafe, who do not do their legally mandated responsibility to report these incidents, and who fail to inform parents about the safety of their kids. It's time to remove the individuals who are complicit in allowing unsafe individuals to work in our schools. We must thoroughly investigate and seek to identify and support any victims who have not come forward with reports. We must also dismantle, I'm almost done, we must also dismantle the structures that allow this yes?
If I can ask you to please wrap up, thank you.
Like 3 more sentences, thank you. We must also dismantle the structures that allow this institutional betrayal to take place. We need to ensure that there are clear, transparent hiring practices in place to ensure the safety of our community. We need to ensure that there are clear policies and protocols in place to protect the safety of our staff and students. We also need to ask serious questions about the role of consultants in our education system. Finally, I would like to point out that the same school leaders who said it was safe to have people like Dr. Alege in our schools are the exact same ones saying it's safe to learn in person during the pandemic. Thank you very much for your time. I appreciate your attention to this important issue. Good night.
Thank you, Maya. Have a good night. Next up, we'll have Estela Arboleda. Good evening, Estela. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. If you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, it would be appreciated. Over to you, Estela.
Yes, hello. I want to testify today in support of Superintendent Peters and the takeover. He has done a wonderful job, not only in his leadership position, but also in helping Providence students get back on track. As a person of color, I support our superintendent and what he's doing for our children. Thank you for your time.
Estela, thank you very much for testifying tonight. It's appreciated.
Okay. You have a wonderful evening.
You too. Thank you. Next up, we'll have welcome Alberto Arboleda. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. If you can please keep your comments to 3 minutes or less, it would be appreciated. Over to you, Alberto. Alberto.
Thank you. So the first thing that I want to say is thank you for this opportunity. And then I want to say that I support the Superintendent Peterson. I support the work that he has done so far. At least he's being honest. He's coming up front and saying, yes, there was a mistake during the hiring process, but I don't see any of you politicians on this, and I'm not a perfect politician, I'm new at this, but none of you offer any solutions to this. None of you are being proactive about it. It sounds to me like all of you are just like on a political trial, looking at your political agenda, saying, oh, I didn't get a job when I applied, and it's because they're bringing people out of state, or you guys are saying, well, did it happen before or after the matter, blah, 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 give us the timeline. No, you got to be proactive about it. None of you give any solutions and say, hey, you know what? Maybe we need to revise the hiring process. Maybe we need to come up with better ideas on how to do this so this doesn't happen again. Of course, everyone is upset about it, but at least the superintendent is coming forward and saying, you know what, guys? There was a mistake. I'm here. I'm in front of this. I'm going to make sure it doesn't happen again. That's what you want. That's how you gain trust on people. Not, oh, you made a mistake and you ran away from it right away. Like all of you are telling them, there's a bunch of people telling them, you need to quit, resign. That is not how you solve that issue. At least he's trying to work with what he has. And you guys need to support him instead of attacking him. Whether he's black, Latino, brown, it doesn't matter. You guys should be working as a team and supporting him. For our kids, that's what matters here. But none of you are presenting solutions to this. None of you is coming forward, being proactive, and saying, you know what? Hey, maybe there was a gap here. There was a gap there. We need to revise that. Nah, that has not come out from any of you. This is all about you guys being racist and attacking this guy because you guys want the school board that was before to take over the state. That's not the solution. Thank you for your time.
Alberto, thank you for testifying. Have a good night. Next up, we'll have Ryan Fournier. Good evening, Ryan. Welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. If I can ask you to please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less, it would be appreciated. Over to you, Ryan.
Okay, thank you very much. Hello, I'm Ryan Fournier, an ESL teacher at Nathaniel Green Middle School and a resident of Providence. I want to thank the Senate Oversight Committee for holding this hearing. Superintendent Peters' hiring practices are questionable. Not only did he hire Dr. Alege, who he knew had a background of disturbing accusations of inappropriately touching students' feet in 2009, but he passed upon 15 other possible candidates for the position in order to do so. I have trouble believing that none of those 15 candidates were qualified. Superintendent Peters has knowingly put students and staff at risk by dismissing the serious accusations from 2009 as, at best, simply rumors, or at worst, that what Alege did in Florida was no big deal. In Providence, our leadership should not follow suit with the disturbing reality that adults won't believe the abused when they come forward, a reality that abused children have to deal with every day. Children should believe that the adults that they come forward to will take them seriously and not give their abusers high-ranking jobs in some other school district 11 years later. Beyond just that, Superintendent Peters is the turnaround superintendent for the Providence School District after the John Hopkins report found that Providence was underperforming. Part of that report specifically states how the offices on Westminster are bloated with redundant six-figure positions, while teachers and other staff who work directly with students continue to be consolidated or outright removed. Is there a reason why we need a director of innovations, a director of school innovations, and a director of innovative programs, but we couldn't seem to find a place for middle school culture coordinators who acted as extraordinarily important mentors within our community for our students? It's beginning to feel like the turnaround is being used as a way to hand out unnecessary positions via nepotism and as a way to profiteer over our struggling school district. Thank you for your time. Have a good evening.
Thank you very much. Ryan? Next up, we have Melissa Babcock. Melissa, welcome to the Senate Committee on Oversight. If I can ask you to please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Hi.
Over to you, Melissa, whenever you're ready.
Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, wonderful. So, what I wanted to say tonight and where I wanted to start was Commissioner Infante Green. She said tonight that she stated tonight that she was not in the knowledge of knowing that Dr. Alege was part of Providence's hires until after. Sorry, I have an echo. So she didn't know that Dr. Alege was hired, but she, back in 2019, when the turnaround plan was coming out, had guaranteed that personnel decisions would all stop at her. So all of the things that have been done here in Providence can be attributed back to, good, bad, and ugly, to Commissioner Infante Green. When it comes to our current superintendent, who doesn't even have the certification to do the job, is working under an emergency cert, as has been stated tonight, I have brought concerns to him several times this year. One of them about the firing of teachers with much-needed MLL certifications and teachers of color, because, in his words, they were not quality teachers. There's a difference, he told me, between being qualified and being quality. And I needed to know the difference between the two. Wouldn't I agree, is what he said to me. I'm going to read you his statement from what he sent me through email when I addressed my concerns about teachers who had evaluation scores of 3 and 4, have never had a warning, and have been working for the district for between 2 to 3 years doing this job, day in and day not out, without so much as ever having anyone question their quality of character until Dr. Peters came in here. So,
Melissa, you still with us?
So sorry. So he told me, thanks so much for reaching out. I'd like to offer a word for your consideration. Quality. I'm not speaking of the teachers you referenced in your message, but these are my general thoughts. Color matters, but quality does as well. If you are black, white, or whatever, and you are not of quality, after receiving documented support, then I support termination. In my estimation, Qualified and quality are very different terms. Just because you check the box of qualifications does not mean you are quality. In your situation, I would caution you around making these assertions unless you have data around why they were terminated. What you have described is not equity, it is equality. I'm happy to chat offline. Tonight I heard Mr. Peters say repeatedly how in his 6-step process that Dr. Alege was beyond qualified for this position, but he himself, in his own words to me on March 6th, told me there was a difference between being qualified and being a quality teacher or administrator. And he needs to start standing by his words. I demand, as a teacher in Providence, who has been looking out for parents and students and fellow teachers all year, that both AIG and HP make the decision that we all need them to do to rebuild trust and resign. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. Have a good night. Certainly last and not least, testifying tonight is Mary Beth Calabro. Mary Beth, welcome to the Senate Oversight Committee. I ask you if you can please keep your testimony to 3 minutes or less. Welcome to the committee. Over to you, Mary Beth.
Thank you, Senator. I appreciate your time. I also appreciate the committee and the Providence delegation for having this hearing and allowing us to provide testimony. You have heard on more than several occasions this evening about the egregious acts of Dr. Alege and his position of Deputy Superintendent of Secondary Schools. I am the current president of the Providence Teachers Union, and I serve over 1,900 members. This past weekend, I swear I've heard from more than half of those members as they are upset, angered, frustrated, and further demoralized by these allegations from Dr. Alege. The sad thing is that this could have been prevented. The sad thing is that this child that was attacked and abused in Warwick didn't have to be if they had just done their due diligence. It's a simple keystroke on a computer. It was widely publicized in June, so I find it very difficult to believe that neither the superintendent or the commissioner were aware of it. It was publicized before Dr. Alege was given his position. So I find that timeline to be suspect. But I also find that we've also had several other highly suspect hires in the upper echelon of the network. Brett Dickens, as you had heard, was not only removed from a school because of poor performance, but she also took part in covering up sexual harassment of a young female as her nephew was the assailant. We have all lost trust, confidence, and belief that Harrison Peters and Helica Infante Green can lead us through the transformation of our schools. We have lost trust and faith in those relationships being able to be repaired. I would like to note, as you asked for facts, that Superintendent Peters mentioned that Steve Gehrig participated as an independent consultant for the hiring of Dr. Alege and participated in providing a process by which all of the candidates would go through. On July 24th in 2020, Superintendent Peters and his wife formed a Florida nonprofit corporation called MCEL United, Inc. According to documents filed with the Florida Secretary of State, the other incorporators of the MCEL included Steve Gehrig of Kansas City, Missouri, and Eric Holland, a superintendent of Zone 4 in Fulton County Schools in Georgia. Steve Gehrig is a senior associate of 4 Points Education Partners, which boasts on their website of their work in Providence Public Schools, which appeared to predate Dr. Peters' arrival. Per the website, the organization, Initial for Male Leaders of Color in Education, has held 3 convenings of district leaders dating back to 2017. So I submit to you all that Steve Gehrig is neither independent, and there is a relationship between him and Mr. Peters in a nonprofit company, and he is a vendor of the Providence Public School District. This is just yet another sign and signal of his inability to make professional judgment decisions that don't include nepotism and ignoring of facts. I also submit that while he, Mr. Peters, was being questioned about the 2017 Act, where he was the deputy superintendent, when the parents were asked, the majority of the parents were very supportive and said that they understood, which is what Peters told the reporter. However, the reporter called 20 parents whose children provided the written statements to the sheriff's office, and everyone they spoke to had no idea that the action had occurred in the class. In 2017, Mr. Peters also received consulting income from a scandal-plagued education consultancy firm called Dulles Enterprises, Inc. ERDI is a marketing firm which pays superintendents to sit down with representatives of company seeking to do business within school districts. Superintendent compensated for these meetings, and the marketers are compensated for holding them. In 2016, in Baltimore County Schools, Superintendent Dallas Dance was sentenced to prison for a kickback scheme involving unreported income from the Education Research and Development Institute, and instead of reporting the consulting income from ERDI, Dance used a false name of DULA Inc., and Mr. Peters used the same fake name on his 2017 Form 1 for income tax. According to the Baltimore Sun in 2017, he was disclosing payments under a false name, which was never properly registered with the Illinois Secretary of State and is a fictitious or assumed name, which helped to obscure the nature of the consulting payments. That comes directly from the Baltimore Sun.
Mary Beth, if I can ask you to please wrap up.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yep. I was just going to say that there is obviously a pattern of inability to make clear, intelligent, informed decisions. And now we have impacted a child and caused trauma unnecessarily to a child in our state. It's unacceptable and shouldn't be allowed to continue. Thank you.
Thank you, Mary Beth. That concludes the verbal testimony for tonight. I'd like to Senator Whip Goodwin, Majority Whip Goodwin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I know the hour is very late. You've been here. We'll probably be finishing up on 4 hours. So I don't want to belabor the point. I just wanted to follow up on 2 things for a brief moment. For the call that call to support Superintendent Peters that made the allegations of potential, like some of these discussions were racist, and he brought up an individual, James Duffy, physical education teacher in Providence, that nothing happened to any of the individuals. That's not true. And this did not occur under the state to have nothing to do with Commissioner Alfonte Green or Superintendent Peterson, but I just wanted to rebuke that statement because it's just simply not true. James Duffy was charged with 5 counts of child molestation, and the principal was fired. I happen to know this because it's near and dear to my heart. It's the elementary school, Harry Kazarian, that's a few doors up from my home. So I just wanted that for the record. And just winding down, Mr. Chairman, I have one quick question. I think maybe for Superintendent Peters, I wanted to know if Dr. Allegria had a lot of access to the children and the students in the Providence school buildings.
Thank you. Dr. Lege's prime responsibility was to coach and develop school leaders, principals, and APs. He spent most of his time with adults. We do believe in job embedded support, but he spent most of his time with adults.
Most of, but not all. I'm just
Well,
trying to
that's his
understand, as I
assignment.
see it from the
All of his time. Well, all of his time is spent coaching and developing adults. He is no.
He was not traveling in and out of our schools that you.
Yes, that's why I said job embedded professional development. The support and development happens in schools. So yes.
So he did have access to children if he wanted in our school system. Because as I said from my opening statement, and I was one of the first to speak. How very saddened I am by all of this, and our constituents. I mean, these are all emails from basically constituents. One poor woman at 3:04 a.m. on Saturday morning wrote to the Providence Centers that she was sad and she was upset about what's happening in the private school systems. I mean, this is really people's minds and hearts in the city of Providence, and I know that you all understand this. Mr. Chairman, I just don't know how we conclude here. I think there was so much more raised, and I know what the time concerns. I think we must have to continue this oversight. I mean, like what Mary Beth Calabro, the Providence Teachers Union, just raised was a whole different level of stuff that maybe should be investigated. I think they should. And I mean, some of the allegations made and brought forward by Brett Dickinson, the HR director, or whatever her title is, and Senator Bell's concerns about achievement first. We need some more answers, but I just don't want to belabor any time. Just thank you all. Thanks to my Providence colleagues in the Senate, and to you, Mr. Chairman, all the members of this Oversight Committee. And thank you for appearing, Commissioner, and to you, Superintendent Peters. Thank you very much.
We're happy to follow up with any questions or any other concerns. Happy to do that. Please let us know.
To do it in a formal way. Thank you, Superintendent. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Majority Whip Goodwin, well said. As I indicated earlier, this is the first in a series of Senate oversight hearings on the state takeover of the Providence Public School Department. Unfortunately, this is the first one that needed to happen the way it did on the topic that it is. But I've always said to folks, we are not going to shy away from our accountability and the responsibility for which we've been duly elected, entrusted to accomplish. There will be difficult situations, more like this. Unfortunately, when the buck stops in our lap, we're going to accept the charge and take the charge forward. Madam Whip, as you indicated, the situation in Providence several years ago was a Providence situation. Yes, this is a Providence situation as well, but the current situation is the state has accountability, and I say those words succinctly and definitively, accountability for the Providence Public School Department and the thousands, the tens of thousands, as you well know. I'm not telling you, Madam Whip, anything you don't know, or the folks in Providence that you've lived here all your life, and you take very seriously. So there will be follow-up hearings that will be conducted to take and look at some additional areas that were brought up tonight and some other areas as well. I want to thank Commissioner and your team for being here, Superintendent and your team for being here, President Board, Nick Heeman for being here. But I want to summarize and finish, as I indicated, and I promised I would, and I will try and be very succinct. We talked about the 6 words I mentioned earlier: judgment, trust, confidence, history, risk, and gamble. I think adding to those tonight, there's a few statements I want to make. We as a state are accountable. We take our role, we as a General Assembly take our role extremely seriously. The question that both the Commissioner and the Superintendent brought up about, can the trust be rebuilt? Because we're talking about the lives of tens of thousands of students. That's what we're talking about. Their families and their futures, especially as we come out of this pandemic situation. Change cannot happen without the trust. We talked about that trust a minute ago. How does this impact the turnaround that's underway in the Providence Public School Department? I think we've gathered many facts. We've collected more data. We've certainly answered some questions regarding timeline that were important. I know many of us, including myself, were confused about the timeline based on what we read, based on what was provided, based on what we said. But I think based on the answers tonight, we have a better picture of the timeline. The pieces of the puzzle that we didn't know about, we now have the pieces of the puzzle. We know what the picture looks like. I'm not certain how we move forward from here, but clearly doing nothing is not the answer. So with that, I want to close tonight's hearing. I'd like to take a motion from Senator Oyer for adjournment, seconded by Senator Dela Cruz. All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed?
Aye. Aye.
Committee members, thank you very much. Commissioner, Superintendent, thank you very much. Everyone, have a good night.